Welcome back, everybody. So this would be episode 9, and in this stop we're stopping in Singapore. Essentially, this film is a collaboration between 3 Chinese countries: Hong Kong, Singapore, and Taiwan, and directed by Herman, my favorite Chinese director. So this is a category 3 film that deals with a bunch of, I guess you could say, taboo topics that are over here in North America. And so here's the disclaimer for it. So I'm going to be talking about some of the elements of the film that might be, I guess, triggering a little bit. So I'll put at the bottom, or I'll have at the bottom here, a time code that you can skip to if you just want to hear about the rating. So let's get into it. So this film is The Second Coming by Herman. And in case you don't know about it, I'll read the back, which is different than the synopsis or summary that's on Imdb, which is fine. You'll never know from the quiet, ordinary lives Ming and Jen lead about the dark secrets they hide. Time and hard work have plastered over their misdeeds. Then, when their daughter Lucy turns 14, her behavior becomes increasingly strange. She turns violent and kills, forced to confront their tangled past to save the family. They discover a shocking truth. Someone they killed has come back for revenge, but they don't know who it is and who it wants to kill. So I've seen this numerous times, and yeah, it's definitely a tough film to get through, as with, I guess, most category 3 films because of their subject matter. But this one I really liked. The framing is great. The prologue is an interesting way to start the film. It sets up the mystery and causes confusion, which is a good thing for this. So, as with all Herman films, I'm sorry if I butchered his last name. Every film he does, category 3 film, starts off with a graphic scene that basically encompasses everything that you're about to see within the film and stuff like that. Some films, it's more prevalent or whatever, where you can really notice that this has everything in it, and then this one's kind of like laid back version of it, but it still shows everything you're gonna see within the film, every graphic thing. And it has it's a graphic scene about the taboo topic of abortion and is portrayed as a flashback. So without getting too more into what the actual scene is, you'll have to see the movie if you can find a copy of it, if you want to see what scene it is. I'll touch upon it later on with some of the other notes I have. So the mirror shots are perfect in it. Some of them are in the CHEN family's kitchen, and it shows them like sitting at the table, and it's just really uniquely shot, and the cinematography overall is perfect, and it flows really good. And I'll talk more about it a little bit later on, just basically dissect some of the scenes. With this review, I picked up on a lot more, and it's definitely a little bit more dissected than the usual reviews. So the score is great and fits within each scene. The visual effects are believable. So the CG is used well, but it still looks CG, like it wasn't blended right. It stands out, but it works well in the context of the movie. And it certainly helps if you watch the behind the scenes, where they actually touch upon all this, and they even touch upon how they shot it. The scares are from the perspective of Lucy, which is due to her connection with the spirit that is haunting the family, and I'll get more into the spirit as the notes go on. The flashbacks are used sparingly to give proper context to the present without it feeling expository, which is a good thing. Blocking is very good, especially during the mirror shots. There's a moth in it, and the moth is used to represent the son slash twin of Lucy, who was aborted in the opening flashback. And a little spoiler, the moth is actually used to represent the mom as well later on. But in a very confusing scene that I am still confused to this day about. So the story structure is very good. The editing is great, especially in the flashbacks. The spirit possessing his twin to harm those who have harmed him is an interesting element to the story, and I would say is something that you don't normally see in like possession films, or it's not like touched upon. So what I thought originally was unnecessary shots actually kind of work in the one of the flashbacks where it shows Ming killing the man that Lucy's mom. I forget her name. I think it's on the back. Oh, Jen. So, yeah, it's an odd shot. At first, it didn't really make sense, and then after watching it a few times, it doesn't seem unnecessary, but it's not something that you'd think would be necessary to it, but for some reason it actually works. So the choice to shoot outside the house, showing the inside, so whereas there's no like actual windows and stuff like that, it could be representative of the spirit watching the family, which if you dive even deeper into it, that could even be an allegory for the audience watching the film. I know it's confusing. This movie is a little bit confusing, but it makes sense in the way that it was put together. So it portrays an urban legend that an aborted child will haunt the mother later in life, and this urban legend is also shown in another film called Are You Here? The North American title would be Ouija 4. It has nothing to do with the Ouija films, Origin of Evil, or it has nothing to do with those, but it does have to do with a Ouija board, and I'll probably review that at some point. The spirit's appearance with the holes was actually caused by the chopsticks in the opening scene. So, given the fact, like, from what I've said and the fact that chopsticks were used, I think you can kind of get how graphic the actual opening was and why I'm not gonna describe what happens. The cross-cutting at the end between the mom and the kids is heart-wrenching, and it's still, like, that's kind of how the movie opens as well, which adds a weird time bubble into the film, and I think I have a note on that somewhere. So the mom is in the hospital because of the accident that's in the opening, as Jen is being taken to the hospital with her son Sonny and Ming. But Ming is also in the same hospital, if not on the same floor. So it creates an interesting time loop where there's like 3 different versions of Jen. So there's the older Jen that we see wakes up from a coma that she's been in for 15 years or so. And then there's Ming. Then there's the Jen that dies, and her spirit is then represented by a moth flying with the sun, and the twin says that the mom doesn't really belong and it doesn't really show her death, but it's hinted at when the medium, played by Susan Shaw, is on the way to the Chen family residence after she gets into an accident on the way there. So yeah, there's a couple different timelines, and I guess you could say endings, and it's kind of confusing as to which one is which, and even like for it to end on the note that it does with it ends on an extended version of the opening scene, which is interesting, and it doesn't do much to really add to the film other than maybe it's representative of purgatory in a way, which would also be an interesting way to view the film. Now, I didn't know this, but the actress who plays Lucy also plays the twin. So, yeah, I thought the way that they achieved that, I thought was pretty cool. And yeah, I'd seen the movie numerous times before, and before watching like the behind the scenes, and that kind of really surprised me a little bit. And I guess you could say the moral of the film would be to basically think before making a tough decision. Who will it affect? Stuff like that. So the distance between the father and daughter is very different than how, well, between Ming and Lucy is very different than the relationship that Jen and Lucy have, and I guess by proxy, Sunny and Lucy. Sunny takes on a more paternal role in Lucy's life because Ming is kind of cold towards Lucy, and that's because every time he looks at Lucy, he sees a person that raped his wife. So he does treat her different, and it was actually originally shot in 3D. There's this initial mirror scene with the twin, I guess to show an example of one of the scenes. The faded brown look of the flashbacks is a great choice to differentiate from the main story, I guess you could say. The time bubble element is perfectly executed in my opinion, even though it is kind of confusing. There is foreshadowing I didn't pick up on until the last time I watched it, but when I wrote down on my notes the first time, I didn't pick up on it. So there's foreshadowing within the set dressing, which is great. There's actually twin dolls, like a boy doll and a girl doll, and yeah, it's really interesting that they put that in, and unless you're really looking for things to pick out, that you might not pick up on that. And I guess here is where I touch upon that shot that I thought was unnecessary. So all the graphic shots, I won't talk about it in depth, but it's basically when Lucy first becomes fixated with the moth that's flying around, and somehow it causes her or her twin to kill. Yeah. You'd have to see it to know exactly what I mean, but all the graphic shots have an emotional impact on the characters and are therefore absolutely necessary for the film to actually have. The sound design overall is very good. One thing that I noticed that I'll have to look into a bit more is how they bookend the film. So I think there's like maybe 5 minutes before we get to the actual abortion scene at the beginning, and then there's actually the birth of that twin at the end of the film. And I think that's how, I think there's the same amount of time between the film actually starting, like when you see the first shot, to that abortion scene, and then from the birth to the final shot of the film, the final second. I think it's the same amount, and that's why the opening, that's why it began and ended with basically the same scene. I'm not 100% sure on that. I'd have to look into it a little bit more. So if I had to give The Second Coming Sheng, I think I pronounced the original title correctly. If I had to give it a rating, I'd give it a 10. Pretty much because it made me actually think about the film and research the film, and it's just very well executed, in my opinion, of course. So yeah, if you like this review, yeah, I'm not sure where you can actually watch it other than trying to get a DVD copy from something, and I'll link a couple sites that you could probably try to find, but I don't think you can find a digital copy anywhere to watch except for maybe a pirate site, but I don't condone pirating. That's why I buy most of my movies. And the next review is going to be another Herman Yao film. It might have actually been his breakthrough film for North America with Ebola syndrome, which is another Category 3 film that was a little tough to watch. Hope you stay tuned for that, and stay tuned for my thoughts on that film in Stop 10, I guess, which would be Hong Kong. Now, I probably could have put my favorite Hong Kong horror film in that spot, but I think I wanted to challenge myself with this one, so stay tuned for that one, and I'll see you then.